Guyanese have been writing locally and on the international scene for quite a while. Welcome to Oral Tradition and another adventure in Guyanese literature. Let's also welcome Professor David Dabydeen, all the way from the UK.
Thank you.
David, welcome to Oral Tradition.
Thanks, Petamber.
You have a wide array of publication. You know, prize-winning poetry, prize-winning novels, peer-reviewed academic books and paper, and you keep writing. Where's the source of all of this?
Well, Petamber, nice to see you again. This must be the 15th program we've done together. Let me ask you a question first. Is this the only television program on books in Guyana?
It is the only television program on books, and thank you very much for supporting this program.
All right. So, so you've been a sole guardian of, in terms of television terms, of Guyanese literature. I
would say that, but I'm still looking for to pass the torch on to someone who bears this love for promoting and enhancing our literature. I'm still looking for someone who can perhaps even co-host this program with me.
Well, I hope you find somebody to help you, because I know over the 25 years I've known you, you've been the sole promoter, agitating for recognition of Guyanese writing, especially in Guyana. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's always my privilege to talk to you.
Oh, thank you.
But with regard to the question as to why I write, it's almost like saying to a alcoholic why he drinks. You write because that is what you've always wanted to do, and you can't stop doing it because then you're in a kind of a malaise, a kind of depression. Mm-hmm. And of course, I would rather prefer not to have been a writer, because it is arduous. Any writer will tell you this. It's challenging, it's difficult, it's burdensome, and it doesn't pay. And when you're faced with a blank page, it's like facing a fire, for me anyway, it's like facing a firing squad. If I don't fill that blank page in, say, 3 hours, I am mentally executed, or I execute myself mentally. So writers, including me, have a kind of an obsession with their craft. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And their main task, really, as writers, is not to create propaganda or to create messages or to engage in ideological stances. They can. Some of the characters can do that, but it is as beloved Toni Morrison told all of us: write beautifully, and be conscious of writing as a craft. Because if you're to be a writer, if you're to be a carpenter, you can't just knock together 2 pieces of wood,
right,
and call it a table. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Though I know a few people who do that. But it's the same with writing. You've got to. It's crafted, and therefore it's challenging to come up with images that startle you. As I think it was Shelley who said that the business of the poet is to strip away the veil of familiarity, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, to reveal the naked and the sleeping beauty. That's Shelley. So the writer's business, it seems to me, and I'm just parroting what many writers will tell you, is to make you see things anew. Hmm? Now, my new novel, which is called Sweet Li Jie. Li Jie is a girl's name, a female name. It's set in China, and I felt not obliged, but I felt impelled to write about China because I spent 5 years in China. And I was very moved by the kindness of people and the variety of people and the hospitality to foreigners, which is a distinctive mark of Chinese culture, mm-hmm, not just in Beijing, but in the villages and elsewhere. People are helpful. If you get lost in Beijing and you ask somebody, they might even walk you to your destination. You know.
Remarkable.
Well, China only recently opened up, and therefore foreigners are still novel to the Chinese. Maybe after 20 years, they'll say, "Find your own way. I'm not walking with you." But I felt that I should write about, impelled to write about China. For many reasons. I was immersed in, when I was there, I immersed myself in Chinese poetry, Du Fu and Li Jie and so on. And I read some Chinese novels in translation. Highly ornate, very much about landscapes. Anyway, there are two other reasons that I felt that I should write about China and about Chinese migration to the Caribbean. One is the Chinese are largely invisible, as you know, in our West Indian writing. Largely invisible. There's a beautiful short story by Michael Anthony, and bits and pieces here, and of course Willie Chen,
Yes,
Trinidad.
Trinidad,
Yeah.
right.
But Willie Chen was undiscovered. I just happened to meet him at the hotel in Trinidad, and he said, "I'm Willie Chen." I said, "Yeah, great." He said, "Can I buy you a drink?" I said, "Yeah, definitely, sit down." And then he said, I write. This was in 1986, I think. He said, "I write." So he gave me his manuscript. I remember reading it on a plane and thinking, this is something, you know, there's a real talent here. And so I got it published in England in 1988, King of the Carnival and other stories.
Yeah,
Beautifully written.
Yes. Oh, yes.
He's a writer with a sense of language, and especially a sense of very vivid with characters. He's very good at creating characters. Anyway, there's Willie Chen and a few others. And so I know that my very good colleague, Mark Tunbridge, who teaches at the University of Warwick, his doctoral dissertation, which I was lucky enough to be his supervisor at Warwick, was on the representation of Chinese and Indians in indentured laborers in Caribbean literature. I have a very personal interest in the Chinese as well, in that my great aunt, Rini Chin was Chinese, of Chinese extraction, and I spent a year in Georgetown boarding with her, and one of the undoubtedly the most memorable and beautiful year in my life in Georgetown, where you could imagine the roast pork. Oh, you know, the Chinese are brilliant at cuisine. But anyway, I spent, and I've always felt a kind of obligation to her as well, to try to put on paper something of her experiences. So the novel is set in China in 1917, the backdrop being the First World War, 1918, the Great War. And some Chinese are fleeing China because they're afraid of being invaded. China has always been invaded from the 19th century onwards. By the British, the Germans, the Japanese, everybody. And so some of them are fleeing the possibility of being invaded and killed by foreign soldiers. And so I make some of them flee to Guyana.
That's the connection.
Yeah.
I was waiting.
And so therefore the particular person who flees to Guyana, we see Guyana through Chinese eyes. Yes. So his views on the various ethnic groups, his views on the landscape, his views on how people do business and so on, are seen through Chinese eyes, imagined Chinese eyes, obviously, because the business of a writer is to enter into somebody else's consciousness, or try to enter into somebody else's consciousness, and to try to see through their eyes and feel through their nerves. So it's an attempt to see Guyana through Chinese eyes. And so that's the novel. But then if you ask me what is the novel about, I'll have to say to you frankly, I really don't know. I only wrote it. And it's only years later, after you've written something, that you may go back to it to read it, and then you think, oh, that is what I meant. The meaning is always secreted from the writer.
And very often time it's the critic that brings out certain...
Very often, yeah. In my own experience, I've come across some literary critics who are writing about my work that I suddenly realize, that was what it was about. But yes, you never know what you're writing about. It's always a mystery even to you. And what I do, if I rarely reread any of my novels, rarely. In fact, I would say almost next to never. I only reread them
Bits and pieces
if they have to be republished or new edition, or bits and pieces that I know that I read at conferences and festivals. Why? I think when a book is finished, it's finished. It's not mine, it's yours. And you can throw it in the bin if you want, right?
Yeah.
Or you can read it and look forward to the next one.
I know you're saying
But
putting it in the public
it's
domain.
not your... but it's good as well for me, because when I do... I can't remember most of the things I've written. I can't remember the characters. I can remember vaguely places and so on, but I can't remember in detail. So when I do go back, it is startling. I think, gosh, did I do that? Or, my God, I should rewrite that. Do you see? And so it becoming unfamiliar to you means that when you revisit it, there is an element of surprise.
Right.
It also allows you to repeat yourself in your new novel. Because don't forget, it's
the thread, right?
Yeah, everything you write is a variation on a theme or two themes. You know, it's a kind of set of variations.
Like what you said, that writers writing back to other writers.
Yes.
Writing back to Guyana, writing back to Wilson Harris, writing back to Mittelhoff. You know.
Well, in this new novel, there's a character called Harris. I can't write about Guyana without reference to Harris. I've written about Harris, as you know, in the past, in at least two other novels, right? He is somebody who is not just personally generous to me, not personally generous, generous in a literary way, in terms of encouraging me to write, but there was a certain intellectual and philosophical depth in his writing, which was hard to arrive at, because he's not a simple writer. He's not a simple naturalistic writer. There's something dense and philosophical about his writing, and you just have to be patient with it. But when you do, when it does reveal itself, it's completely memorable.
I know.
I can remember, and you do, I can remember passages of mosquitoes in a gutter that he talks about. I can remember, there are things about Harris that when you read it, then you put it down. It takes a long time to get into Harris. And a lot of scholars get into Harris. I don't know how many ordinary readers encounter Harris, but once you encounter Harris, there's something that enriches you, really, your imagination, yes. And I've been lucky enough, because he came to Warwick many, many times. I invited him, and we became friends. But more than that, when he spoke, when he gave a lecture, Petamber, it was mesmeric. You're just, because he moves from one idea to the other, from one text to the other, from sort of classical Greek literature to contemporary Western literature, seamlessly. And
Hindu mythology, yeah.
Well, you know, he has an enormous range of references, and they're not sporadic or individualistic. They cohere. They cohere.
Yeah.
And I tell you, listening to Harris, I'm so happy in my life that I've listened to Harris many times in London, in Belgium, wherever we've ended up in conferences, and I'm always in awe of him, right? As a brilliant Guyanese. And when he got his knighthood, I was happy for him, you know, yeah.
Guyana was happy.
Now, what we've done with Harris now, moving away from my novel, let's talk about a real writer, Wilson Harris. Cambridge University has now agreed with the Harris family to house Wilson Harris's books, his own personal library, and his papers, as well, and also to catalogue them and to make them available to anybody. But they will also digitize Harris's papers and his annotated his annotations of books, and give it to Guyana.